Hey everybody, welcome to Admit One with gmoney. Today we have the founder and CEO of Restless, a digital fashion label dedicated to providing tools for brands to cultivate and monetize their identity in the metaverse. It has caught the attention of investors like Kevin Lin, Paris Hilton, and Red DAO by breaking barriers in the fashion industry. A fashion designer by trade, she has created immersive experiences by blending both gaming and fashion, as seen in collaborations with Assassin's Creed and Pokemon. Today, she'll be discussing more on the Restless Genesis drop. Please welcome Charli Cohen. Hey, Charli, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. I'm a bit of a sore throat, so I'm kind of have this like mysterious deep voice, but it should work for podcasting.
Yeah, sounds like you'll be great. Where in the world are you at the moment? I know we were both in New York last week. We didn't get a chance to meet up. Are you back in London?
I'm in LA now. So I
Oh,
literally
okay.
just like flew in about an hour ago from San Francisco.
Oh, wow. All right, cool. So we're like on opposite sides of the planet right now. I'm currently
Yeah,
in Milan,
exactly.
the
Very nice
beauty of the
too.
internet.
Yeah, indeed.
um, yeah, what was I have something here in my show notes that says you've been coined the Ray Donovan of the metaverse. So can you describe what that refers to?
Yeah, so this like moniker came about from the head of women's wear at Selfridges, who I've worked with on a few projects. And really, there was just a period of time where I kept getting called in by different brands to try and rescue their metaverse strategy. And there was a ton of things that happened within the space of a month. So that's how it came about. I'm the fixer.
All right, I mean I love it. I mean as somebody that we've had a relationship for a while through Red DAO, and we've met up multiple times. At this point, I think that there couldn't be anybody that would be considered a better fixer than you. So I think that's a good name. As long as there's
Thank
no
you.
dead bodies lying around, right?
I mean, not lying around, no.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to start off by a little bit about by your background, right? Before we start discussing how you got into the NFTs, into the NFT space and the metaverse. What's your background? I know you're a fashion designer by trade, and just let's just start there. And is fashion something you were always interested in? How was it as a fashion designer, and then what led to your entry into Web3?
Sure. So I mean, I was like the young girl who like wanted to be a fashion designer. Like 80% of young girls, I just like carried it through. So I started my first brand experiment when I was 15. Wanted to just learn the ropes of how the industry works, like how to like what it means to do wholesale, what it means to fill out a tax return or set up a supply chain. I just wanted to get hands on with it as soon as possible and figure out what I was going to be getting myself into. And then I ran that up until starting my formal fashion training at university in London. And during that time, I kind of accidentally fell into social media marketing. So I had quite a successful blog at that time. So I guess 2009, 2010. Um, Ended up getting very into Twitter and digital marketing and kind of figuring out how to build an audience, and then just started doing it for other people. So when I came to launch the Charli Cohen brand in 2012, which I did off the back of my graduate collection, I was already very kind of deep in this idea of, how do I build out a digital story and a digital community to support this physical brand. Um, and that's really how the brand progressed. So there was always a lot of storytelling. The collections tended to be inspired by social issues and political issues. So it really worked to kind of build out the narrative in digital. I got into AR and VR quite early as a way to facilitate that. So we were doing like London Fashion Week and I guess traditional fashion calendar at that time, but trying to bring in these alternative experiences. never a huge fan of traditional fashion industry and always went a little bit against the grain with the way we approach things. And I guess that just continued as we pushed more and more into the digital space, started working a lot more with the gaming industry and experimenting with in-game skins with physical counterparts. So by the time the metaverse was kind of coined as a term, we were already there as a brand, and it was very natural to start moving from there into the NFT and Web3 space.
Right. Yeah, no, I that makes total sense. I guess what was it, what was it that you really saw as wearables becoming the future of fashion? How did you see that? Like, because like I always tell that story. For me, like it happened by playing Fortnite and playing with a bunch of teenagers, and they're like, "What skins did you buy?" And I was like, "All right, this would be this massive super cycle." What was that like aha moment for you?
I think, I guess, being like mid millennial, so I started like engaging with social media for like MySpace was the first time when I was like, 12 or 13. And like, so even at that point, digital identity and the way that all the different elements that I chose to best express myself, it was a real priority for me. And that only intensified as I got older. Instagram took it to another level. And I was always interested in the idea of how can you kind of reconcile physical and digital identity? Do you even want to? Is digital identity about having multiple alter egos? I guess like I was living it. So it's like over time, I noticed that it was having kind of an adverse impact on my mental health, because I created this identity or these identities online, couldn't fully reconcile them with like my physical self, but like maybe I preferred the digital version of myself. And the idea of actually kind of bringing in or trying to create a way and create tools that make it easier um, for people to be able to reconcile those two things kind of just became a passion project for me.
Right. I want to get into that a little bit, right? Because I think that's super interesting, right? Like, what was your reasoning for having for having different digital identities? Like, what was your thought process behind that?
I guess I was very like, I mean, when I was younger, I was a goth. I was very into alternative subcultures, and there were certain like platforms where you could really kind of lean into that these parts of your identity more, in a more kind of exaggerated way. Um, especially so when I was 13, we moved to New Zealand, but via like 2 year sailing trip to New Zealand. So it was quite like unconventional. There were lots of periods of time through my mid-teens, especially where I wasn't in an environment where it felt kind of socially acceptable to express my identity in the physical space. So the digital world became more important as a kind of welcoming, safe place where I could explore my identity.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I feel like the 2 year sailing trip to New Zealand. I feel like we could probably have a full 1 hour conversation on that. So I won't get
Definitely.
into what that was like. I'm sure that was definitely an experience, right? And definitely a non conventional experience. But yeah, it's interesting because like I think about what you were saying, and like when I originally started G Money, like I wanted it to be like really authentic to who I am as a person, so that I didn't need to deal with, oh, like this, I'm perceived as something like
Mhm.
online, and then like when you meet me in person I'm a different person. And like, but like there is, by creating these different identities, it allows you to kind of lean into different traits of your personality. I just thought for my mental sanity, like it wouldn't make sense for me, right? So that's why I was super curious as to your thoughts on it, because also, right, like the beautiful thing is like I could also have like an alt account if if I wanted to, and I could be like the anti G money, right? The antithesis of G money. I don't think that would be like very mentally stable for me, but it's just interesting, right? Because that when you're given all these tools, it's really like what is it that you want to do with it, but you also need to make sure that like it doesn't affect your quality of life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like people do fall into both camps. There are some people who, it makes most sense for them to have a consistent identity across all platforms, and that's where interoperability becomes really important. And there are a lot of people, especially like gamers, who are like absolutely used to creating alter egos, and that escapism is a really important part of what like virtual identity provides for them. So yeah, I guess different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna before we get into like exactly how you got into Web3, you did a collaboration with Assassin's Creed years ago. What was it that you did? What was that like? How did it happen?
So that was, I guess, like our first major gaming IP collab. Um, I I can't even remember how it came about. We just kind of ended up pushing more and more into the gaming world just because of the aesthetic of my design and the fact that we were already doing a lot of stuff in digital. Um, I think it's very, very likely that we just reached out to them because that's the approach that I tend to take. I'm a hustler, so probably just hit them up at some point. Um, and in a pre the new game about to come out, Valhalla. So we created this collection with them, a physical collection, and a this sort of very like high concept video campaign. And the physical collection had different AR lenses integrated. So we had elements of the game experience in the AR lenses, so that when you um, hold your phone up to the physical product, there are different graphics on each garment that would trigger a different lens.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and I mean I've seen the videos of it. I remember one of the first times we met, you showed me the videos, so I thought, I mean, that was really cool and very early on, which is incredible. Um, and I guess what was it? What was your entry into the Web3 space? Like your for like NFTs. Like when did you first find out about NFTs, and like what was that journey like? And did it make sense right away? Did you like have to think about it to distill it a little bit? Like what was that like?
So I came into it on the tech side in 2020 when I was trying to figure out how to better streamline these collaborations we were doing, where we'd be working with IPs and we'd have like multiple different virtual environments as well as physical worlds where we had a version of a design. And at that time, it was kind of the best way we could kind of hack our way to interoperability, but it was a fairly like lousy experience for the user because they'd have to go through a separate UX, a separate checkout experience in each of these platforms to be able to get each version of this design. So I encountered NFTs as a potential solution for that, and really just went down the rabbit hole from there. And I guess probably early 2021 is when I started really getting involved in the NFT artist community. And then it became, I guess, much more personal for me because I'd come into it, looking for this tech solution, and actually found myself among a community of people who were probably like more like-minded than any community I'd ever been part of in my life, like through like education, university, certainly like fashion industry. Suddenly like all of these creatives who are also futurists and also into tech, it was really amazing. I mean, like, you know how it is, right? The Suddenly there are all these events, and like the likelihood is that you'll be able to have a great conversation with a few people. That certainly wasn't my experience of, the, I guess, like 7 or 8 years of running my brand prior to that. So yeah, I obviously stuck around because it ticked all the boxes for me.
Right. Yeah, no, it's funny because I felt very much the same way when I first came into the space. I'm like, wow, and I specifically remember, like, I think right around the time I wrote my thread on why I bought my CryptoPunk, I was like, well, I'm just gonna hang out with my internet friends in Discord for the next 2 years, and when the world figures out that like NFTs are a thing, like, then that's when we'll have our time to shine. And like it just happened like way faster than I ever anticipated. Like I knew it would happen, but I was like, yeah, it's gonna happen like years from now. I didn't realize it was gonna happen like weeks from now. So that was crazy. But yeah, to your point is like people like would we like geek out in Discord, right? In Telegram, and have these long conversations over like what the future could look like, and people were super passionate about it. And I think that's what was the fermentation of everything that got started over the last 2 years, year and a half. I want to go into Restless. So what led to the founding of Restless? What is Restless exactly for those who don't know? And like what's the origin story there?
So, I mean, to start with, so Restless is a platform that we're going to be launching imminently, that allows you to easily create interoperable digital fashion. So we provide an ever evolving set of 3D models that are rendered for multiple different environments, Web3 native, but also traditional game industry. Um, and we do limited edition drops of licensed IP, so with Web3 native projects and artists, but also with traditional IP like music industry, pop culture, anime, so on. Um, you can then customize the garments with graphics and textures, mint it as an NFT, put together the bundle of different games and environments you want to take it into. You can also redeem a physical version if you want, and then you mint that as an NFT. And within the Restless world, there's a kind of a broader game in there, so you're able to earn upgrades and evolutions to your garments. And if the goal is either flex or secondary market value, then by sort of grinding, you're able to increase the rarity of your garment over time.
Right. That's awesome. How many I guess worlds or metaverses do you plan on having compatibility for, or is it going to be something that you roll out over time? Is it going to be like I assume you're going to have like if something's compatible in Unreal or Unity, it's probably compatible in all the Unreal and Unity worlds. And like, how does that work? And what, if you can share, what legacy or traditional metaverse type worlds have you had discussions with that you can talk about? And what's that all looking like, the interoperability side?
Sure. So it's something that we are rolling out over time, especially because on the traditional side, everything has its own bespoke integration. Obviously, a lot easier with Web3, where everything's just managed through Wallet Connect. So as a holder, you're able to keep coming back into the platform, and as we add new options for interoperability, you can keep adding them on. In the traditional game space, the partner will be launching the kind of the main public platform next year with is Roblox, and then there are a series of other traditional games that will be initially coming in via the actual art and IP drops with some unlockables, and then gradually will be integrating further and further into the Restless platform.
Right. And so then how do you see this? Like, I think this is really interesting because like you went from like a fashion designer to a tech founder. And like one, how has that journey been? And then I guess how do you see like obviously, I think by creating another outlet for creativity, it affects fashion. But I guess on a larger scale, how do you see that this like affects the fashion industry over time?
So I guess like the first question, like I think being a founder is just the same whatever industry you're in. So like honestly, my experience hasn't changed. Just running a business with a slightly different team structure. But yeah, otherwise very very similar. Um, I guess the main difference is who I'm hanging out with, and I prefer the people that I'm hanging out with as a tech founder than as a fashion founder. Um, but the so how it's going to impact the fashion industry as a whole. Um, I mean, the side of it that I am most excited about is the democratization of the fashion industry, and the fact that there's now a platform, a level of autonomy that brands and creators can have for this whole new generation of designers and brands to come about. I'm more interested in that side than in how existing kind of heritage and luxury brands can come into the space. Although, of course, they are and will over time. But I see this as being it's just creating a level of accessibility that's just never been possible in fashion before, because it is so fucking expensive to start a fashion brand, to sample and produce a physical collection, the like inverse cash flow that you're dealing with all the time. It's you have to be either very lucky or very privileged, or know the right people, and that's kind of it. And whereas Web3 is and digital fashion, sure, there are barriers to entry in terms of technical know-how, but that's something that can be learned. I mean, with Restless, part of what we're doing is removing those barriers so that artists are able who can create beautiful 2D pieces, they're able to just use our 3D models and apply to that. But across the board, you can you can start something. You can, if you have a physical brand, you can test the water with digital renders, take pre-orders, create something that's much more sustainable, remove dependence on having wholesale accounts. I think it's so exciting for kind of innovation and creativity, and this, a new wave of young talent kind of taking over.
Right. Yeah, no, to your point is I think one of the beautiful things of Web3 that I think attracted both of us and attracts a lot of people is, kind of like leveling the playing field, kind of making the playing field a little more flat, right? Is like, if you're in a third world country and you could be the best designer on the planet, but if you don't have access to, the financing and the right connections, you're never going to be able to design what it is that maybe you're the best in the world at, right? And I think by opening up things to Web3, yes, you're still going to have some level of you have to have technical know-how, you probably have access, you need to have access to a computer and the internet, but ultimately like that costs way less than having to be like, oh well, I need to own a factory and and have the right connections and business financing in place that really like makes it really hard and difficult to do things now, right? um yeah, and so I think like the interesting thing is, right, like you've chosen to focus on the meaning and psychology around identity in the digital world. How is your experience in building your brand and your community online affected and helped like what you're doing with Restless, right? Like and how you're going to help creators with that.
So I guess um, throughout building the Charli Cohen brand, I've always been like, that brand has always been an extension of me. So I've always been like super open as a founder. Um, talked a lot about my experiences in the industry, about my personal experiences, and the community is really kind of built out around that. So coming into Restless, I guess as a Web3 founder, I'm like about as doxed as it comes. Um, and that's actually been, I think that's been a big draw for the community that we've built out specifically around Restless in Discord. they are interested in the, I guess, having a very sort of transparent view into founder life and like the company life and that side of things. You know, I mean, obviously, like transparency is key to Web3
Hmm.
anyway, whether you're doxed or not. Um, so Restless, you know, as I build out the community there, it's, you know, it's not my named brand. It's something that's going to be built out in a much more um, community driven and collaborative way versus like the Charli Cohen brand, where I'm, you know, I'm essentially dictating the designs and dictating the taste of the brand. Um, and, you know, and also the, I guess the community as well. Like I am my customer for Charli Cohen, and that definitely reflects in the like in the customer base and community base. Whereas with Restless, I'm building the starting point, and then progressively handing over to the community more and more to be building out the world. So I guess like it's a similar start point to the Charli Cohen brand, but the end point is kind of like choose your own adventure. I don't know where it's going to end up in that sense.
um, I wanna talk about Charlie Cohen brand for a minute or two. What? So you're still operating it, right? Okay, and what's it been like? I guess how's it been? What's your experience been operating both companies? Like at this point, because you've been operating Charlie Cohen for a while now, right? And that is like your initial background, your initial trade. Has it? I'm sure like any business, there's always things that come up that you didn't expect. You're like, oh, yep, that just made my life more difficult. What has it been like? I guess operating both companies at the same time and I assume you're doing Charlie Cohen stuff on Restless as well.
Yeah, so I think, you know, one thing that makes it easier is there is a ton of crossover in terms of the like types of partners we're working with as well. So especially like as we're bringing in traditional IPs, it's actually a lot easier to bring them in through a bespoke collaboration with Charlie Cohen that doesn't necessarily have to be on chain, and kind of gradually ease them into the idea of digital fashion, digital retail experiences that way. And then kind of onboard them into Restless to something that's sort of bigger and more scalable. Um, but I think you know, running both companies, the key thing is the team. So the Charlie Cohen team, I've had the same people working with me for like the vast majority of the last 10 years. So I'm able to be a bit more hands off, and you know everybody knows exactly what they're doing. So that's you know I wouldn't be able to um, be running Restless and building Restless at the pace that it needs to be built, if that wasn't the case. So yeah, super fortunate there to have this, you know, amazing long-standing team. And then with Restless as well, like this year, we've been very rapidly building out the team since we raised at the beginning of the year. And you know, that's, you know, having these awesome people that I can delegate to and trust, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, the thing I've noticed is that, you know, the stronger you can build your team and get talented people on there, the farther you're gonna go, right? Because you know that you can delegate something to somebody and it will get done, right? And that's really important to kind of you know, be able to say, hey, this needs to get done, and then you know you don't have to check like what back two or three more times. But hey, is this done yet? You know that as soon as you say it, it's as good as done. And that to me has probably been the most important thing that I've been happy with, like with my team personally, right? Is like how professional people can be, and how incentivized everybody is towards building towards that better future.
Yeah, and I think in Web3 especially, it works so well for startup life because I think everybody has become much more entrepreneurially minded, even
Right.
from just, you know, learning how to invest and kind of having their own like side hustle in the NFT space. And when you're building up a startup team, you absolutely need everybody to be like taking ownership in their own initiative over their side of the project, right?
Right.
There isn't structure in the same way that there is in a corporation. So you have to
Right.
be kind of super
It
comfortable with the weird hours and the, figuring out what's next on your to-do list if like the CEO is on a flight somewhere, which
right.
like we always are, right? Always on a
Yep.
flight somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Always
Um,
traveling, always different time zones, right? Like, yeah, no,
yeah,
it's funny you say that because like I think I was thinking about it literally just yesterday of like, wow, like just going through my timeline and there was yesterday what came out yesterday there was some macro news that came out this week, maybe or a couple days ago, 2 days ago, and I was like, wow. I'm like, everybody's become a macroeconomist on my timeline. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, like we expect inflation to be this, and like the Fed is going to raise by this much. And I'm like, if nothing else, like everybody is becoming more educated and more financially savvy, right? Like, because if I were to talk to probably like my parents at this age, my parents even now probably don't necessarily understand, the macroeconomic consequences of the Fed deciding to raise by 1% instead of three quarters of a percent, right? And like now, when I go through my timeline on like a few days ago, everybody has an opinion on it, right? And so like I'm like, wow, like I just think people are becoming more financially savvy. And if nothing else, that is a good thing, right? Of like understanding how the world works, that maybe people didn't pay attention to because 50 years ago it was like, all right, well, I'm working at this, large corporation and this is my job, and I go and I do it because that's what's required of me, right? And now I think especially in this space, like people are just because people are much more entrepreneurial, even if like, and I know this because the people on my team where it's like, they can be working with me, and but then also it's like if you want to be taking on other business, if you can handle it and it doesn't affect your job and your output with me, like I have no problem with it, right? Like go do you, and maximize what you can do with your time and what you want to do. And even if you want to start another project and work on something cool, like how can I support you, right? And so I think that's also, I think, a secondary effect that I don't think gets discussed
yeah.
enough, where I'm like,
I
wow,
think
people are
that's
just yeah,
that's a really good point. And sort of it was the way that I also approach things with my team, through running the Charli Cohen brand, where I would kind of encourage them and support them in their own side projects. And then, um, whenever at that time, sort of like raising capital, there was an expectation that you would have your like, full-time lockdown team. They wouldn't be doing anything else. And it's like, no, it's
yeah,
like it's so much like they are so much more, productive and passionate working with me when they also, have their own kind of complementary stuff and their own life going on.
yeah,
So I think it's amazing, this shift. I mean, really through the pandemic, where it's become much more normal to have a team of, um, of freelancers or of people who are, working part time between two companies or running their own thing on the side, like building their own project at the weekend. Um, it creates a lot more energy across everything, I think.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And then like, there's synergies there where like you can help them, and like yeah, it just I mean, I love it. It's an energy like I don't think I've ever seen. Like, and like even like I think at the well, I was really young for the tech boom, but like I feel like it wasn't like that. I feel like in the tech boom, it was like, all right, like how can I become like one of the first 10 employees at XYZ company and get a bunch of stock and, hopefully an IPO. So it's like, it's just a very different process. And it's exciting. I've been thinking about it a little bit more over the last like few days and few weeks. And I'm like, wow, like this is really changing the way society works going forward, which is super interesting, right? And I don't think it gets talked about enough.
No, I agree. It's
And
like we're all in one big startup in Web3.
yeah, exactly, right? And yeah, I mean, I think and sorry, I didn't mean to go off topic there because let's get back to Restless for a second. Um, I think one of the cool things you said was like the customer journey, right? Of like, if you buy a wearable, right, and then you could kind of, if you use it more over time, or if you unlock certain achievements, you can make it more rare. Could you talk about like that gamification a little bit? Because I think that is super interesting, because right now we're in a world, and I think I've been thinking about this a lot with 90cc, is like, we're in a world where if you want something that's more rare, you have to buy it, right? So it's like, you know, that kind of determines rarity, and that determines who gets the rarity. But like, as I think about gamification within 90cc, I'm like, well, do I necessarily want the person that spends the most money to have the most rare item? Because that isn't always like the best customer, right? Like, the best customer is the biggest brand ambassador, in my opinion, right? The person that is passionate about the brand, that wants to be involved in as many things as the brand does, and everything that the brand is involved with. And that isn't always the person that has the biggest pocketbook. So like, I think it's super interesting, your thoughts on that, and like your thoughts on gamification. I'd love for you to kind of expand on that if you can.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is very important to me and the team. And we have a lot of gamers on the team, and I guess the general sentiment within the gaming industry is it's always really frustrating when things are price gated, or the same thing that you've like been grinding for days, weeks to earn, like somebody else can just buy that same benefit. So from the kind of get-go of figuring out what our game mechanics would be, we very much wanted it to be kind of earning based. So we have so like within Restless, we have like an XP experience points system. There's various things within the app, within the games, that you can take wearables into, where you're able to earn, basically like through the amount that you're engaging, through the amount you're wearing, through the amount you're playing around with designing stuff, even if you don't buy it. And you can exchange those points for various benefits. So there are the evolutions, which are kind of like Pokemon Go style evolutions.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of different evolutions that are tied to a certain skill tree that you get allocated when you first mint your garment. And then also with every drop that we do, there are certain graphics and textures that can only be won through a sort of gachapon experience, which you can play with XP as well. So the rarest graphics, you can win with XP, but you can't buy them.
Right. But then if you win them with XP, you can then sell them when you want, or no?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. And I think that's like the key difference here, right? Is like, to the point that you said, is like, if let's say I grinded for like a month, right? Or a week, whatever, however long a time, right? And I earned that like special limited edition graphic, or whatever it is. If somebody could come on and be like, oh yeah, like, of course, yeah, I'll just buy it from like the game, and I'll pay like whatever, $10, $50, whatever it is, and I automatically got it too. You're like, oh well, that's like unfair. But it, like, if I'm spending that time in, and then I sell it, then that becomes a profit source for me, where it's like, okay, like, the only way that this person can do it is if they buy it from people like me, or myself, or people like myself. That starts to become like, oh, right, like, that you're allowing them to kind of participate in that profit mechanism, right? Of not just, oh, the haves and the have-nots, right? Because it's like, again, it's like, maybe somebody has more time, and they're more passionate, and they're willing to commit more of their time, which I think, personally, I think time is the most important asset on the planet, right? That's the only thing that, no matter how much money you have, you can't get more of it, right? Like, we all have
For sure.
an equal amount of time. We have 1 second right now, and it doesn't matter, like, how much money you have, we still have that same second. So like, to me, I think that's like super important. And I'm glad you're thinking about it, because I think right now, the way the entire NFT space kind of works, and I guess retail in general, right, is like, very much is like, the more money you have, the more special, access that you have. And it's like, that shouldn't always, I mean, I understand where it makes sense at times, but it shouldn't always be like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think from our perspective, everybody having equal opportunity to get the rarest drops or the rarest evolutions is, that feels fair.
Right. Yeah, and so I guess with that, I want to go into the Restless Genesis drop. What can you share about it, or what are you free to share about it at the moment?
So the Genesis drop will be part of our closed beta. So the beta is going to be the first introduction to the Restless Creator tools. It's going to be mobile based. It's launching soon, so it will be in the earlier half of Q4 this year. And we've worked with our community to select 10 artists from the community who've all produced a special Genesis graphic. We have a coat silhouette that we're launching with for this drop, and everybody who gets access to the closed beta will have the opportunity to mint one of these coats with with one or more of the graphics, depending on how they want to customize the coat. The beta is, like I said, a limited number of people who'll be able to access. We have kind of gamified the access experience. So first of all, you need to be in the Restless Discord. And when we launch beta, there'll be a puzzle game. And then it's really the first people that make it through the puzzle game into the beta up to the cutoff point will be in, and as long as you're in, then you can mint. So right now, for the last few months, we've been like running practice. It's going to be like a Picross based game. So there's like weekly practices where everybody's just like becoming absolutely expert at Picross.
I
It's
love it.
very enjoyable to watch.
I love. And do you have any idea how many NFTs are going to be involved in the Genesis drop? So like how many of those
Um,
people are that make it through? Is it going to be like first 100 or first 1,000, first 5,000, 10,000?
it will be less than 1,000.
Okay. All right, cool. I mean, that's awesome to be super exclusive. Uh,
So
yeah,
yeah,
I think that's I think
keeping
that's
it
really
very
cool.
limited.
Yeah. Also, it's
And
been my
then
experience. Yeah, go.
Oh, and I was going to say the kind of the main um, utility of the drop as well is that you'll get kind of permanent whitelist to all of our future license drops. So
Right.
and we really want to be, and the reason that we have created this bit of friction to get into the beta is we really want the holders of this Genesis drop to be our like core community and core fans of Restless.
Right. Yeah, and it's also been my experience that, especially with Admit One, it's better to start off small and kind of like get all the kinks out while the community is small, as opposed to being like, yeah, we're gonna have like 10,000, 20,000, and it's like, you need to have like the customer service in place and the support tickets and all that stuff in place, that it's like, oh, like, and one bug or mistake or something will lead to like, so significantly more headaches when the as the community gets bigger. So at least for myself, like I have found that by starting off small, I can make sure that like it's manageable, and that the issues are manageable when there are issues. And it's like, all right, it's at that point, once you get the processes in place, and I'm sure you know this because you've built businesses now for a decade plus, that that it's easier to scale once you have the processes in place. Supposed to be like, yeah, we're gonna have so many people involved right out of the gate, and then it's like, oh, like what did we get ourselves involved with, right?
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, our whole launch process is staggered. So starting with this mobile beta drop, and then the first iteration of the web version will drop at the beginning of next year, and then we're just going to be gradually rolling out features and rolling out drops before we
Right.
start introducing user-generated content as well, which will be close to the end of next year. But I agree, like phasing it out is really important. You want to make sure that you continually have the opportunity to be improving the experience.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think that's the right way. Have you decided on a price yet, or are you still figuring that out?
Still finalizing it, but it will be pretty accessible.
Okay. All right, cool. And is there anything else you wanted to share about the drop or Restless that we haven't covered yet?
Um, I guess this is the key part. The next phase after this mobile drop is the bit I'm most excited about, where we launch the web app. So it's all being built out in Unreal Engine, and we're working
Ooh.
together with this amazing studio. So they're an Epic partner. They do a lot for Fortnite, but they've also done all the graphics for like Dune, Blade Runner, like a lot of the Marvel and DC movies, and
Hmm.
the so the this kind of world that all of the creative tools are going to exist in, that we're launching at the beginning of next year. Like, it's just looking so badass, and I can't wait to start sharing previews of that.
Ooh, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that. So does that mean maybe there's an Epic partnership in the future, possibly?
We're working very closely together.
Mhm. All right, cool. I know. Listen, I'm always on your end of the conversation where people are always asking for the alpha, and it's like, I'm sure the conversations are happening, but I had to ask because I'm sure people in the Discord would definitely be asking me about it regardless. So, um, yeah, I'm looking forward to everything that you're doing. I think you're you're one of the leaders in the space. I love interacting with you on and Red DAO always constantly, and we're also both members of Unicorn, correct? Yeah. So I just love what you're doing, and I know that what you're working on is definitely going to be next level, pushing the space forward. Before I let you go, I want to ask you what's your favorite NFT?
My favorite NFT. Um, I mean, sentimentally, um, NFT that my husband created when he was red pilled into Web3 at the beginning of this year, and decided that the first thing that he was going to do was like learn how to write a smart contract, because that's kind of how he rolls. So he
Uh,
didn't want to get engaged in it until he'd like figured out all of the kind of base level engineering. So that is my sort of sentimental favorite. Um, Artwork wise, I mean, my PFP across most platforms is Capsule House. I really, really love the artwork. Um, and that was also one of the first projects that kind of really played around with game mechanics, where you've minted, I guess it was like probably around like fall last year. And then the capsule started hatching like gradually staggered throughout this year. So I think it was pretty cool. It was at a time where people weren't really thinking about how to make it more of an experience. It would just be like a drop and done. So
mhm.
yeah, a lot of respect for those guys. And obviously, I will be cherishing and hodling my Admit One NFT forever.
Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you for the shameless plug. Thank you. But yeah, no, and so I guess also, and thank you for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate it. For people in the audience that want to find out more about you and Restless, what are the best places for them to keep up to date with everything that you're working on?
Best place definitely Twitter. So just at Charli Cohen on Twitter, and like everything goes through there. Restless also like definitely worth being in the Discord, because that's where the beta access will happen, and any alpha is going to be in there. So you can also access that Discord via my Twitter account.
All right, perfect. And I guess for those, it's Charlie without an E, right? Because
That's
that's
right.
I know
Yeah, just to
that
make
can be
it really
confusing.
awkward.
Yeah, to make it a little more difficult. So, but yeah, thank you for coming on, Charlie. I love what you're working on. I think everybody should definitely go out and follow Charlie on Twitter, keep up to date with everything. And I think she's going to be doing awesome things with Restless. So, you know, thank you. Looking forward to it. And everybody, thanks for coming on and listening to Admit One.